Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, hope you're all doing alright out there. For a long while now I've wanted to talk about trail braking, as in braking in a corner with the front brake, which is something you are specifically not taught to do when you're learning, but it is something that you do find yourself doing later, and it is an actual technique. It was, in fact, I found myself doing it and then later found out that it had a name, and I was like, oh, so it is a thing. I've been quite hesitant to make a video on this because, as I say, if a new rider tries this, they could likely come unstuck, and that's why they're not taught to do this. But I decided, rather than make, a properly instructional video, I'm just going to explain the principle, the theory of trail braking from the bike, but also using a model, because that's going to be a lot easier if you understand the differences mid-corner. So the way it's taught when you're doing a CBT, or they're training you to ride, is they'll say that when you approach a corner, you let off the throttle, brake to the speed that you want to be going. When you enter the corner, you sort of lean into the corner while catching onto the accelerator, and then you sort of hold the throttle through the corner and accelerate out. That's the normal way. All your braking is done before the corner. With trail braking, you brake specifically right up to the apex. So I'm braking into the corner, up to the apex, feathering off the front brake as you get to that apex, and then transitioning to the throttle. And there are reasons that this is beneficial, both for control, stability, and also safety, believe it or not. So you're like, well, hang on a minute, that sounds like we should all be doing this. Yeah, but you can really go wrong if you do it wrong at the wrong time. Now, it is true to say this is also a technique that's used on the track, but it doesn't mean it's a track-only technique. As I say, I found myself naturally doing it for years, and it wasn't until that I saw a thing later on when I was looking at more advanced riding stuff that I was like, wait, that's, as I say, that's literally what I've been doing. It's a thing. Well, I'm glad to know that I'm not mental, because I didn't understand why I was told not to do this when it seems to be better. Right, I finally found some quiet roads I can show you this on. This can be done at higher speeds or slower speeds. It can be done for different reasons on different corners. There are multiple benefits to it. But I'm going to show you a scenario on just a standard corner up here. So, which one are we going to pick? Could have done that one. Let's do the next one. Okay, so I want to turn left here. They'd normally say, indicate left, let off the throttle, brake to the point you want to brake, let off the brake, shoulder check, turn in, catch on the throttle, and ride through the corner like that. All the braking's done before the turn, so you're not asking the front wheel to do anything other than steer at the point that you're entering the turn and asking for more grip. And that's one of the things to point out. With motorcycle tyres, well, all tyres, grip, if you ask a tyre for grip slowly, like bit by bit, progressively, it will give you lots. If you ask for loads in a big lump, it's going to freak out and just let go, and once you lose traction, it's all gone. And that's one of the things this is about. It's about transition of weight as you go through the corner. So I'm going to do it again. So I start braking here, turn in, still braking, shove my foot into the floor. Okay, let's try that again. I'll just keep my foot the hell out of the way this time. So I start braking, I'm also downshifting, turn in, release the brake, and get back on the throttle as you go through. The reason you're doing this is that when you brake, the suspension's compressing, and when you lean into a corner, the suspension is going to compress. If you enter that corner with the suspension uncompressed, it has to compress mid-corner. Whereas if you've come in with under brakes, it's already at the level you want it to be. So your suspension is set up better to give you better grip and also a better turning radius because of the reduced rake angle when you're braking to the apex. But you're not braking hard to it, it's braking in and releasing as you get through the corner. And this is why I didn't want to make this video necessarily, because it's so difficult to express this in a way that people are going to get. This is where I'm going to talk about safety. If you enter a blind turn while already with compressed suspension, weight is transferred to the front and you're already on the brakes, you can brake in a corner. So say for instance, let's do it with this one here. So I'm turning in, I'm braking, and I can apply more brakes while turning. Braking while turning, something you're told not to do with the front. If you're mid-corner and then you touch the brakes, you get a sudden dive because you've gone from the weight of the bike just leaning into the corner to the brakes adding onto it and transferring all of that weight onto the front wheel. Which is, as I say, if you're already in a compressed suspension state, the tyre's already under load, when you apply that brake with more pressure because you're already slightly on it, it's actually perfectly good and usable within reason. And the benefit of that, obviously, is if you come around a blind corner and find someone on your side of the road, like in the country lane videos you watch me do, I can brake mid-corner and not go into the back of them. Now, as I say, I don't want new riders to go out and start braking in corners, because at this time of the year, you're already asking for it with the amount of, cold, wet weather and muck we have on the road. So don't go and do this and then blame me because you came off. Now, as I say, because the suspension is compressed, it reduces the length of the rake angle. I have a video on rake angle, and for that reason, you can actually turn tighter when the suspension is more compressed. I am still braking. There is diesel. I'm letting go of the brakes. It's something. It looked a bit for petrol or dieseling. You don't do this when you're not sure about how much grip you have, and you don't ask for all the grip at once. It's about progressively asking for it and progressively letting go of it. So let's go to a model. If you are still none the wiser, don't worry. Hopefully by the time I've done this, it will make a lot more sense. Using a Lego model. Right, there's a couple of basic principles to cover. One is about weight transfer. On a motorcycle, when you accelerate, the weight is transferred to the rear wheel. That's why the back end of the bike sits down. When you brake with the front brake, the weight transfers to the suspension, and that's why the front dips. On this bike, the rake angle is completely wrong. It should be way up here somewhere, but we're going to have to deal with it to explain. Now, you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit because I need to not move the bike. I'm going to show you the state of the suspension as we go around the corner. So in the normal scenario, you're riding along like this before the corner. You're told to brake before the corner, which puts weight onto the front wheel. You then let off the brakes as the suspension uncompresses, and often people seem to let off of the brake just as they're about to turn in. So the suspension and the tyres are in a state of being under compression and out of compression at the same time they're turning in. So it's not a great place to be. But if you do it in the right way, you should brake before the corner, release, then as you turn in, the suspension is going to compress down, and as you hit the apex, you accelerate, so you transfer the weight to the rear wheel, which helps you turn the corner, and you come out the corner, accelerating out, and you go. I'm sure, you get that. In the trail braking scenario, you are accelerating up to the corner, then as you go to turn into the corner, you start braking, so the suspension is compressed, and then you start turning in. As you turn in and you get to the apex, you release the brake at the same rate that you gain, compression from turning the corner. Then you transfer onto the throttle and you drive out the corner like that. Meaning that, as you may have seen, you're braking into the corner, you turn into the corner, and then you drive out. The suspension only has to compress and then decompress as it goes through the corner. With the other way, you're, as I say, on the brakes, off the brakes, turning in, then throttle on, then coming out. There's more potential for things to go wrong. Also, as I mentioned about the braking in a blind corner, so say you're going around a corner and your suspension's only compressed a little bit, and then you're like, oh, there's a car, and you brake, wham. This happens, and that puts out the front wheel because you've asked for too much grip in one moment. If you're turning into that corner and you're braking so the suspension is more loaded, if you then apply more brakes, it's a lot more resistant because you're further through the progression of the suspension, and it's not going to suddenly, ask for loads of extra grip in a sudden moment. It's much more progressive for the brakes. And that is why trail braking, as in braking into a corner, is a good idea. But if you are not an experienced rider, if you're not aware of all the ins and the outs and the pros and the cons of all this, and when you do and don't do it, you'll end up like that.